something that can make you do wrong, make you do wrong. Let me be the one you can run to. Just get me to the hospital. I says, I am hurting. See? And by then, man, I had big boils all over my back, man. I go over here, boom, here this lady is lying in the floor, here this pistol is in her hand. I'm saying, oh my God, what in the world? Call the police.
Remember Al Green? Try not to gasp when you see what he's become. Al Green was being intimate with multiple women while preaching about salvation.
My dad says, Al. I said, yes, Father. Well, what is it? He says, pick one girl, not 10.
While his congregation thought their pastor was a holy man, Al Green was battling demons that nearly destroyed everything: his marriage, his ministry, and almost his life.
I went back, up, and I left the door open that time. When she came back up, I seen this whole pot of water, and all of a sudden, I'm full of it.
This is the disturbing truth about how America's greatest soul singer became a preacher, and why the scandals never really stopped. So let's get into it. Albert Leorns Green was born on April 13, 1946, in Forest City, Arkansas, the sixth of 10 children in a deeply religious household. His father, Robert Green Jr., was a strict disciplinarian who ran the family like a military operation, and gospel music was the only sound allowed to fill their home.
My father is like very stern, and we have a gospel group here, and you're listening to this junk. And I'm going like, yeah, but Dad, listen to this guy hit these high notes. Jackie Wilson.
The Green Brothers Gospel Group was Al's first taste of performance, but it came with rigid rules. When young Al was caught listening to Jackie Wilson, the very artist who would later influence his style, his father kicked him out of the house. He was just 13 years old. This early exile would prove formative. Living away from his family's religious constraints, Al discovered a world of blues, R&B, and soul music that his strict upbringing had forbidden. Sam Cooke became his idol, a gospel singer who had successfully crossed over to secular music, showing Al that it was possible to serve both God and the charts.
It was just a gospel group that I suppose he found out that we could sing. We didn't know it. So, I mean, I listened to one of those tapes, back at the time.
By the time he reached high school, Al had formed his own group, Al Green and the Creations, later renamed the Soulmates. Their 1968 single, Backup Train, climbed to number 46 on the R&B charts, giving them their first taste of commercial success. But the follow-up singles failed to chart, and the group seemed destined for one-hit wonder status. Everything changed in 1969 when producer Willie Mitchell heard Al perform at a club in Midland, Texas. Mitchell, who had been struggling with personal tragedy and drinking heavily after losing his brother and wife to cancer, saw something special in the young singer. Mitchell invited Al to Memphis, to the legendary High Records studio where magic was waiting to happen. The collaboration would produce some of the most sensual, spiritual soul music ever recorded, but it would also set Al on a path toward fame, temptation, and ultimately, tragedy. The partnership between Al Green and Willie Mitchell at High Records created pure musical alchemy. Mitchell's production style, sparse, hypnotic rhythms anchored by the legendary Memphis Rhythm section, provided the perfect backdrop for Al's voice, which could slide from whisper to wail in a single phrase.
I says, I don't know why Al Green's supposed to sing. He said, well, you should cut the record, sing like that. I'm going like, I don't know what that means.
The early 1970s saw Al Green dominate both the R&B and pop charts with a string of hits that defined the sound of soul music. Tired of Being Alone, Let's Stay Together, Love and Happiness, I'm Still in Love with You. His voice became the soundtrack to romance across America, and his live performances were legendary for their raw sensuality and emotional intensity. But with fame came temptation. Al Green was a strikingly handsome man with a voice that could make women swoon, and he found himself surrounded by admirers wherever he went. The strict religious upbringing that had once constrained him seemed like a distant memory as he embraced the lifestyle of a soul superstar.
My dad says, Al. I said, yes, Father. Well, what is it? He says, pick one girl, not 10.
His father's advice about picking one girl, not 10, seemed impossible to follow. Al was living the life of a traveling musician, with different cities bringing different temptations. The man who sang about love and devotion was struggling to find those qualities in his own personal relationships. The music industry of the early 1970s was a wild place, especially for a young black artist suddenly thrust into wealth and fame. Al admits he experimented with drugs during this period, though he was more cautious than many of his peers. Despite the temptations surrounding him, Al maintained enough self-awareness to know that he was crazy enough as it is, without adding serious drug use to the mix. But the pressures of fame, the constant touring, and the complexity of managing multiple relationships were taking their toll. The stage was being set for the dramatic events that would forever change Al Green's life and force him to confront the growing contradiction between his public image as a love man and his private spiritual battles. In 1974, at the height of his fame, Al Green met a woman who would change his life forever, though not in the way either of them expected. Mary Woodson was a striking 29-year-old from New Jersey, and by all accounts, she was the kind of woman who could stop traffic. Al met Mary during a charitable concert he was performing at a women's correctional facility. She was there visiting a friend, and Al was immediately drawn to her beauty and presence. Unlike many of the women who threw themselves at him, Mary played it cool, declining his initial invitation to return to his hotel. Their relationship developed over several months, with Al flying Mary to various cities to join him on tour. He was smitten, even writing the song Sha-La-La for her. But there were troubling signs that Al either ignored or didn't fully understand.
And so this woman, Mary, says, you know, you're going to be wonderful. And I'm going like, come on, let's go to the bar and get a drink. She said, you're going to be this wonderful pastor, Al, and you're going to have a wonderful flock of people.
Mary had predicted Al's future ministry with eerie accuracy, but she also displayed disturbing behavior. Al later learned that Mary was married with 4 children, facts she had hidden from him throughout their relationship. Her family would later reveal that she had a history of unstable relationships and had previously attempted suicide. On October 25, 1974, the relationship reached its tragic climax. Al had returned to his Memphis home around 4 a.m. after a recording session, accompanied by another woman, flight attendant Carlotta Williams. This created a tense situation that would spiral out of control. According to police reports and Al's own account, Mary confronted him in his bathroom as he was preparing to take a bath. In a moment of rage and desperation, she threw a pot of boiling hot grits at his naked back, causing severe 2nd and 3rd-degree burns. Then, in the adjoining bedroom, Mary Woodson took Al's own gun and shot herself to death.
I go over here, boom, here this lady is lying in the floor, here this pistol is in her hand. I'm saying, oh my God, what in the world? Call the police.
The incident made national headlines and forever changed how people viewed Al Green. The hot grits story became part of his legend, often told as a punchline, but the reality was far more tragic. A woman had died, and Al was left physically and emotionally scarred. Police found a 3-page suicide note in Mary's purse, and the case was ruled a suicide. But the trauma of that night, combined with the guilt and spiritual crisis it triggered, would haunt Al Green for years to come. The man who had been living the high life of a soul superstar suddenly found himself questioning everything about his lifestyle, his relationships, and his relationship with God. The Mary Woodson tragedy shattered Al Green's world and forced him to confront the contradictions that had been building in his life for years. Here was a man raised in the church, singing songs about love and devotion, while living a lifestyle that often contradicted those values.
I didn't know what to do. I didn't know what to do. I just didn't know. I was completely lost then.
The physical healing from his burns was only the beginning. Al describes feeling completely lost and not knowing what to do with his life. The incident had forced him to see the potential consequences of his lifestyle, and he began to seriously question whether he could continue living as he had been. His spiritual crisis deepened when he realized that Mary had accurately predicted his future as a preacher, something he had laughed off at the time. It was as if her death was calling him to fulfill a destiny he had been running from his entire adult life.
And she says, I'll see you in about 6 or 7 days. She gets in the Cadillac and goes down the hill. I says, but, she's gone.
Al's path to spiritual renewal took him to the Smoky Mountains, where Audrey Williams, Hank Williams' widow, left him alone in a cabin with nothing but water for over a week. This period of fasting and prayer became a turning point, where Al claims he finally understood his calling. The revelation Al received helped him understand that his music had always been about more than just romantic love. It was about human connection, family, and the bonds that hold people together through good times and bad. But he still struggled with how to reconcile his secular success with his growing spiritual convictions. The internal battle between his calling to ministry and his successful music career would define the next phase of Al Green's life, as he attempted to serve both God and Mammon, a balancing act that would prove nearly impossible to maintain. By 1976, Al Green had made a decision that would define the rest of his career. He purchased his own church, the Full Gospel Tabernacle in Memphis, and became an ordained minister. But unlike other artists who completely abandoned secular music for gospel, Al tried to do both, a decision that satisfied neither his congregation nor his record label. Al's approach to ministry was unconventional from the start. He understood that modern audiences wouldn't sit still for traditional 45-minute sermons, so he developed a unique style that blended entertainment with spiritual message, what he called putting medicine in the meat. This philosophy extended to his music. Al continued recording secular albums throughout the late 1970s, but with increasingly spiritual themes. Songs like Bell and Truth in Time showed an artist trying to find a middle ground between the sensual soul music that made him famous and his growing commitment to gospel ministry. His congregation at Full Gospel Tabernacle grew steadily, drawn to his charismatic preaching style and his unique ability to make gospel music feel contemporary and relevant. But some church members questioned whether their pastor should still be performing secular music, while his record label pressured him to return to the love songs that had made him a star. The tension came to a head when Al received a Tony nomination for his role in the Broadway musical Your Arms Too Short to Box with God. Here was recognition for his gospel work from the secular entertainment industry, exactly the kind of crossover success he was seeking. But the balancing act was taking its toll. Al's secular albums were selling less than his earlier hits, while his gospel albums, though critically acclaimed, couldn't match the commercial success of traditional gospel artists who focused exclusively on religious music. The question that would haunt Al Green throughout this period was whether it was possible to serve two masters, the God of his ministry and the mammon of the music industry. His answer would reshape both his career and his personal life in ways he never anticipated. Al Green's personal life during his transition to ministry was marked by the same contradictions that defined his career. In 1977, he married Shirley Kyle, a devout church member who worked as the minister of music at Mount Vernon Baptist Church. On the surface, it seemed like the perfect match, a man of God marrying a woman of faith. Shirley represented everything Al thought he needed: a stable, religious woman who could help him fully embrace his spiritual calling. She was the opposite of the complicated women who had populated his secular music career, including the tragic Mary Woodson.
I don't want to live two lives. One has got to be a lie and one has got to be truth. So I said, no. This is just a new ministry.
Al had declared that he didn't want to live two lives. He wanted truth and authenticity. But even his marriage seemed caught between his old life and his new calling. Their relationship was complicated from the start by Al's continued involvement in secular music and the pressures of his growing ministry. Shirley had initially worked as a backup singer for Al, but her discomfort with performing secular music led to tension. She believed that, as a minister's wife, she should focus solely on gospel music and church work. This created an immediate conflict, as Al's income still largely depended on his secular career. The marriage produced 3 daughters, but it was marked by the same contradictions that plagued every aspect of Al's life during this period. Court records from their eventual divorce proceedings in the early 1980s revealed a relationship that struggled under the weight of Al's fame, his ministry responsibilities, and his inability to fully commit to either secular or sacred life. Some of Al's congregation members had difficulty accepting their pastor's continued involvement in secular music. They questioned whether someone who sang love songs to screaming female fans could effectively minister to their spiritual needs. Meanwhile, his secular fans were confused by his increasingly religious message and his reduced touring schedule. The tension extended to his relationship with his record label, High Records, which wanted him to return to the sensual soul music that had made him a star. But Al's growing commitment to his ministry made it increasingly difficult for him to perform songs like Love and Happiness with the same conviction he once had. Even his marriage seemed caught between his old life and his new calling. Their relationship was complicated from the start by Al's continued involvement in secular music and the pressures of his growing ministry. Shirley had initially worked as a backup singer for Al, but her discomfort with performing secular music led to tension. She believed that, as a minister's wife, she should focus solely on gospel music and church work. This created an immediate conflict, as Al's income still largely depended on his secular career. The marriage produced 3 daughters, but it was marked by the same contradictions that plagued every aspect of Al's life during this period. Court records from their eventual divorce proceedings in the early 1980s revealed a relationship that struggled under the weight of Al's fame, his ministry responsibilities, and his inability to fully commit to either secular or sacred life. Some of Al's congregation members had difficulty accepting their pastor's continued involvement in secular music. They questioned whether someone who sang love songs to screaming female fans could effectively minister to their spiritual needs. Meanwhile, his secular fans were confused by his increasingly religious message and his reduced touring schedule. The tension extended to his relationship with his record label, High Records, which wanted him to return to the sensual soul music that had made him a star. But Al's growing commitment to his ministry made it increasingly difficult for him to perform songs like Love and Happiness with the same conviction he once had. Despite these challenges, Al maintained that he was happy with his choice to focus on gospel music and ministry. He spoke of making gospel a lot of fun and finding joy in his calling, but the personal cost of his decisions was becoming increasingly apparent. Today, Reverend Al Green stands as one of the most successful artists to navigate the transition from secular to sacred music. At 78 years old, he continues to pastor the Full Gospel Tabernacle in Memphis, now serving a congregation that has grown significantly since he first purchased the church in 1976. The Reverend Al Green has found a way to honor both sides of his musical legacy. He occasionally performs his classic hits in concert, but frames them within the context of his spiritual journey. Songs like Let's Stay Together become testimonies about commitment and faithfulness, while Love and Happiness speaks to divine love as much as romantic love. His influence on contemporary music cannot be overstated. Artists from John Legend to D'Angelo to Maxwell have cited Al Green as a primary influence, drawn to his ability to make sensual music that also carried spiritual weight. His vocal style, the whispers, the wails, the perfectly placed ad-libs, became the template for modern soul music. But perhaps his greatest achievement has been proving that artistic authenticity doesn't require choosing between sacred and secular. While many criticized his attempts to serve both worlds, Al Green ultimately created a unique space where spiritual and sensual could coexist. The tragedy that could have destroyed him, the Mary Woodson incident, instead became the catalyst for a deeper understanding of his purpose. The woman who threw hot grits at him had predicted his ministry with startling accuracy, and in a strange way, her tragic death became the price paid for his spiritual awakening. The man who once declared he would never be nobody's preacher has now spent longer in ministry than he did as a secular superstar. His journey from the cotton fields of Arkansas to the stages of Memphis to the pulpit of Full Gospel Tabernacle represents one of the most remarkable transformations in American music history. In the end, Al Green achieved what Mary Woodson predicted all those years ago. He became a preacher with a worldwide ministry. But he did it on his own terms, creating a unique synthesis of sacred and secular that continues to influence artists and inspire congregations around the world. The man who sang Love and Happiness discovered that the greatest love story of all was his relationship with God, and the deepest happiness came from serving something greater than himself. Anyway, that's it for this video, folks. Bye.